Fatalofa, it's Tim Tafunga here. Yeah, just like to have a small discussion over our Australian uh, AUKUS treaty, and with specific regards to the uh, the future procurement of our Virginia class submarines, as well as the that's all part of Pillar 1 of the AUKUS agreement between Australia and the AUKUS members of Britain and America, which brings to mind some of the conundrums that we're facing regarding the Australian national security strategies for the foreseeable future. Now, what appears to be the conundrum that we're facing here is not so much the capabilities of our military national security strategies, procurement in order to meet our national security needs and demands, but it is presenting a particular problem with fit for purpose of our procurements and our material procurement for our national security strategic needs. Presently, the Australian government has signed an agreement with the Americans under the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 AUKUS commitment to taking full advantage of the technological opportunities for AUKUS members insofar as securing their national security strategic objectives for within the next 3 decades. In particular, in Australia, we've got the Pillar 1, which is the conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines under the Virginia Class submarines of up to 8 Virginia Class SSNs. I think Block 5 submarines, SSNs, at a cost of $368 billion for the next 30 years. Now that works out to around $46 billion per submarine. Now, if you do the numbers, that is pretty phenomenal. And to the point of, a ridiculous costing for a bit of bling. Now, insofar as if you do the numbers, insofar as comparable procurements for our potential pacing rivals, insofar as the Chinese military procurement of their Type 093B SSNs, their nuclear submarines, the Chinese nuclear submarine program, the costs of their Type 093B SSNs per unit is $1.5 billion US per unit. Now, I don't know what that is in renminbi or yuan, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper than what we're paying for our Virginia class SSNs. But in saying that, the ridiculousness of our off-the-shelf procurement costings is outrageous. Not only the OTS, but it's also our intended building or construction of our own indigenous versions of the Block 5 Virginia class SSNs. Now, $46 billion per unit for an Australian taxpayer is phenomenal. Now, when you really think about the objective of AUKUS, and this is where we have to ask the question, what is the purpose of AUKUS? Now, AUKUS, our pacing rival, as it were, objectively speaking, is the threat of China. Now, the Chinese problem, as it appears, is the hegemonic rise of the Chinese in their global hegemonic influence in the region, albeit the Asia Pacific and Oceania, whether they're influencing the Samoans and Tongans and Fijians and Vanuatuans and so forth. As a Pacific Islander, one colonialist is no different from what we've had for the past 300 years. Now, what has changed is, as the Japanese once said, Asia for Asians, when they were sweeping across Singapore and liberating the Singaporeans from the British in 1942, as the British called it the fall of Singapore in 1942, the Singaporeans themselves didn't think so, but the British and Australians said it was the Japanese imperialist Axis powers, Nazi fascist expansion throughout the Pacific and Asia. Okay, fair enough. Asia for Asian or Japanese imperialism is another thing. But what we do know is that subsequent to World War II, we had the decolonization process, which led to numerous nationalists and decolonization of Southeast Asian societies, culminating with the Indo-Chinese nationalism and expulsions of the French in Indochina, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, which led to the Vietnam War, whereby the Americans were doing the wrong thing, not figuring out what it was. They said it was the Marshall Plan. The McCarthyist plan of the domino theory, in which Chinese communism and Maoism was meant to be spreading across Indochina, which culminated with North and South Korea, and they were expecting North and South Vietnam to have the same outcome. And today we still have the North Koreans and the South Koreans still confused as to what they stand for in terms of ideology. One aspect is Kim Jong-un, and the other is guys who have musical chairs for presidents. But what we have here in Australia is our seemingly Cold War mentality coming to fruition, which seems to have come to the fore with the Ukrainian war, and recently the threat of the 10-dash line A2 AD within the South China Sea, with regards to the Chinese sphere of influence, military as it were, procuring all the Spratly Islands and all the islands within the South China Sea, turning them into permanent aircraft carrier launching pads for the J-20 and J-35s stealth fighters, and the future expansion of the Chinese military sphere of influence, augmenting the Chinese Belt and Road initiatives throughout the South Pacific and the world. Belt and Road infrastructure developments by the Chinese has imbued a sense of a Marshall Plan throughout the world. The reconstructions of a lot of underdeveloped third world economies with the help of Chinese benevolence, insofar as the Chinese have been able to do mega projects, infrastructural developments from speed rails in Argentina, Brazil, and what have you, and members of BRICS, and building a lot of ports in Africa, in Ivory Coast, all over the place, Eritrea and Djibouti. You got all these Chinese Marshall Plan developments in all of these countries. It's not just Samoa with their proposals to build stadiums and sporting venues for Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, or Samoa, what have you, or even Fiji. The Chinese can do that because, as everybody say, that it's the debt trap, but the Chinese can do it because it's their pearls of the strings of pearls, as it were, and now it's known as the Belt and Road Initiatives, which is to assert Chinese soft power as opposed to American hard power with their policing of the world, with the American 11 aircraft carrier strike groups throughout the world. Presently, what we have here in Australia with AUKUS is the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 initiatives, which promises at an exorbitant costings to Australian taxpayers for the procurement of Virginia Class submarines. Pillar 2 includes the augmentation and the upgrades of our artillery systems, our armory regiments, and including missile defense systems, which include the naval strike missile, the NSMs, the ATACMS, and the HIMARS systems that we are now using, acquiring, in order to increase our national security for the defence of Australia, which is kind of ridiculous because in the end we're going to give it to other countries like Ukraine for free, for pro bono, because that's the way we do things. And also we're going to acquire the precision strike missile battery system, which is a bit more accurate than the ATACMS and the HIMARS MLRS systems, which are pretty accurate. ATACMS are okay, except ATACMS don't work on a moving target. So if a target is moving, the ATACMS don't do too well. So the precision strike missile systems that we are acquiring from the Americans, which is America's best system anyway, and they're just rolling it out into the various batteries, Army batteries throughout the US Army at this moment in time. But Australia will also acquire the precision strike missile systems in the foreseeable future, but that's going to cost us an arm and a leg as well. Now, what we have now is, as has been highlighted in Channel 9's recent broadcast on the Hunter Class Frigates, which has revealed a particular costing issue with a projected cost to the Australian taxpayers of $9 billion per unit of the Hunter class, which means we can only afford up to 3 Hunter frigates. Now, when we put into perspective, comparable perspective, a Chinese 054B frigate with all the bells and whistles, including including the YJ-83 cruise missile air defense system, as well as anti-ship missile cruise missile. It also will have, in the near future, the YJ-21 hypersonic anti-ship missile. Now, presently, Australia doesn't have anything, or America does not have anything remotely as near as effective of a weapon as a YJ-21, or as the Russians call it, the Zircon hypersonic anti-ship missiles. Nothing. America's trying to develop their hypersonic missiles and various platforms. The Air Force has their version. The Navy is slowly developing their version of the hypersonic anti-ship missiles, but they haven't been rolled out and operational as of 2025. Perhaps in 2026, the American anti-ship hypersonic missiles in various shapes and forms will be rolled out eventually, but presently they don't have any. Now, Australia only has the NSM. It's a Norwegian missile system that we are, and even the Americans are procuring for their naval defense platforms, which will in turn improve upon the Harpoon anti-ship missile. But the Harpoon is subsonic, supersonic, but it isn't as effective as the YJ-21, which is the Chinese. The land-based version of the YJ-21 is the DF-21 hypersonic missile. If Australia were able to counter the hypersonic missile, mate, fat chance. Now, we've just seen the Iranian Fatah hypersonic missile pepper the Iron Dome of Tel Aviv and Haifa in Israel. That is an example of the effectiveness of hypersonic missile that the Iranians have been able to devise and to use effectively. And that is an example of how the missile development systems of Russia, China, and now Iran has been able to defeat and undermine the American defense systems from the THAAD, the THAAD, THAAD defense platform, and the Chinese David Sling. The Israeli David Sling Iron Dome defense systems, and as well as the Patriot air defense system, which is highly expensive, and even Australia at this moment in time cannot afford. Australia was contemplating procuring the Israeli air defense systems, but presently it's now that thought bubble is about to be burst after viewing the current Israeli-Iranian exchanges of missile and the air sorties by the F-35. Interestingly enough, for the RAF is viewing the effectiveness of the F-35 penetrating the Iranian Power 373 radar systems, which has allegedly and purportedly been able to shoot down 3 Israeli F-35s. Now, Australia, we have 72 F-35s. If the Iranians are able to shoot down the F-35, that's a slap in the face for our RAF fighter jets, and that makes it more worrying for us because the Chinese has a more advanced radar air defense platform, more so than the Iranians. The Iranians, their version of the Provo or the the Power 373 radar air defense system with their missile defense platforms is in effect a their version of the Russian S-300 upgraded with their indigenous radar systems, which has allowed their S-300s versions of their missile platforms to intercept 3 F-35s. Now, they being able to do that is an amazing feat, which goes to show that they must have gallium nitrate radars on X-band or S-band that can register the RCS of the F-35s, which is excellent. Now, if they're able to do that, then what hope have we with our F-35s up against the Chinese S-400s and the Russians S-400s and the S-500 air defense batteries. The Chinese version of the S-400 is the HQ-9 or the HQ-19. That's the Chinese version of the Russian S-400. Now, they have it. All right. Now, if the S-400 or the Iranian version of the S-300 upgraded with their radar systems are able to detect a stealth fighter, albeit with the very low CRS cross sections of the F-35s, and they are able to shoot down an F-35 in Iran, then you have real big problems with our national defense. Now, if we can't be able to penetrate the enemy or potential enemies with our F-35s, because that's our number one air defense system, and that defends Australia, then we don't have much of a hope in hell in a modern peer-to-peer combat, especially up against a potential pacing rival such as China. Now, that being said, the comparable price of a Chinese 054B is $410 billion US. $410 million US is 9 billion. 9 billion to 410. Do the math. That works out to be 14 Chinese type 054B frigates for every one Hunter Class Frigate. Now, that drawing from the combat effectiveness of the missile defense systems of the Chinese and comparing it to all the ships, the Chinese ships have their missiles with the YJ-83 and the YJ-21. The capability in terms of costings and cost effectiveness comparisons would reveal that not only are we defeated in technology, we are defeated also in our costings and cost effectiveness. So it's a lose-lose. Lose in technological military capabilities, as revealed with the modern day conflicts in Iran and Israel, Ukraine, and seeing the last litmus test with the F-35s in Israel. That's a slap in the face, and we have to review everything. Now, that includes all of our weapons procurement and costings. Is it worth it? An Abrams tank, is it worth it? $9 million per Abrams tank. Is it worth it? Now, if you compare it to, say, a Chinese tank or a Japanese tank, for an example, an Abrams tanks, in terms of its protective armor and its reactive armor capabilities to defend against Lancet drones and FPV drones and the Shahed drones, is combat ineffective. Whether Abrams and the blowout costings for an Abrams tank, is it worth it, begs the question. So, do we need to look further than just American weapon systems? Is it all sensationalized, overpriced hype? Now, you got to shop around. The British, the Type 26, which is the Hunter class, the BAE is overpricing the costings of their units, comparing it to 14 Chinese Type 054B frigates with more bells and whistles in its capabilities, its electronic warfare capabilities, its missile defense systems. It's more lethal per unit than even a Hunter class submarine. The most advanced Type 26 doesn't have the weapons loadout and lethality as a comparable Type 54B Chinese frigate. And it's a fraction of a cost per frigate. Now, these are the things that you need to figure out before you want to throw stones in a China shop. Okay, ia walawa nei te loanga. Ia, manuia, tatou whaasefo.